Hi there, I'm Daniel Reinholz. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm an associate professor at San Diego State University. In my life, people have often assumed that I must be good at math as a white person, as a masculine presenting person, and someone who's not visibly disabled. So that's like given me privileges in the field. And I think in ways that has also boosted my own success because like people didn't question whether or not I belonged. But at the same time, I wouldn't say I always felt like I was good at mathematics. I could probably give you a lot of examples of classroom experiences that made me really feel like I wasn't good at math. And this ranged from, middle school to graduate school. And I think in retrospect, all of those experiences probably tell me more about our schooling system than they really say about me as a math learner. For most of my life, I wasn't really interested in math and I didn't want to be a mathematician. My first love was and still is music. I actually dropped out of high school to pursue music. But unfortunately, shortly after I dropped out, I was diagnosed with thoracic outlet syndrome, or TOS. This is a compression of the nerves that actually has given me chronic pain every day for the last 20 years, and it also restricts the use of the arms. So that pretty much made music, especially professional drumming, impossible for me. So instead, I changed course. I went back to a local community college, finished high school, and later transferred into university for engineering. I think in engineering school, I was dealing with the TOS still, and then also I was very ill for most of my undergraduate, and so just like the long hours, physical demands of the lab, it really wasn't feasible, and I knew that wasn't going to be my future. Fortunately, during the very last semester of my senior year, I took real analysis with Professor Ken Kloppenstein, and this was like the first time in my life, senior year of undergrad, that I got really excited about math. Ken just taught that course in a way, it ignited my curiosity. I really thought math was beautiful and I just wanted to learn more. And after that experience, I was like, how do I do more of this? And so ultimately it got me to go to grad school. Unfortunately, grad school was not the experience I was hoping for. It did not have the same magic. I love the content, but most of the classrooms were sort of uninviting or not accessible. And there was always this fear of failure in front of peers that I think really hindered the joy and engagement. And so like, given that I loved math, I didn't always love the way math was taught. I was like, I'm going to get a PhD in math education. Here we go. And, my parents didn't go to college. And so I actually didn't know at all what a PhD was or the purpose of it. But I thought if I did that, I would learn to like teach really, really well. Spoiler alert, I didn't learn much about teaching in my education PhD, but I did, develop the tools and started to meet a lot of people who were really wonderful educators. And I started to learn a lot more about teaching math. So I'm a math educator, and broadly speaking, my work focuses on understanding how racism and sexism play out in like common everyday interactions in the classroom. And so specifically in my work, I've been co-developing a classroom observation tool called Equip. I work with Neural Shaw. And so we try to understand student participation and how that could be patterned based on race, or race and gender mostly we focus on, but also disability and other social markers we might look at. And so what we do is we track those inequities, and then we find ways to create data so that we can give information back to instructors so that they can become more aware of inequity in their classroom, and also so that they can shift their classroom practices to actually disrupt those inequities. More recently, I've been focusing a lot on disability justice. For me personally, as an autistic, non-binary, and disabled mathematician, I often feel that disability isn't really a part of a lot of conversations that we have in math. And that goes for a lot of less visible identities that people might have. And really, when we do talk about disability, it's often in problematic ways that sort of frames what disabled people can't do and stuff like that. And so I think in a lot of ways, our society just assumes that disabled people aren't going to do well in math or won't take a math-intensive career, especially living through the COVID-19 pandemic the last few years. As someone who's immunocompromised, I've actually had COVID twice. It just makes me realize like it's precarious in our world as a disabled person. And so, whereas mostly in the past, I haven't really spoken a lot about my own experiences or my own disabilities, I've been doing a lot more work recently to make that visible and to have those conversations so that we can push back against ableism and also all the ways that that's closely tied up with racism, sexism, colonialism, like other systems of oppression in math and also beyond math. I think especially now as a tenured faculty member, it's given me sort of power and privilege and space to speak back to these things without fear of retaliation, without fear of losing my job. More recently, I've been collaborating with Lizette Torres-Gerald, and we've launched something called Signs of Disability, which is an emerging community that focuses on disrupting ableism in mathematics and providing disabled role models to others in the field. I would say actually in many ways, our goals are really aligned with Meet a Mathematician. So I'm really delighted that you all had me as a part of this. And also our project has been inspired by prior efforts like Mathematically Gifted in Black, Lathisms, Indigenous mathematicians, and so forth. And so I'm really grateful to have role models in the field. And actually, you've interviewed a lot of those people, and I've loved reading their stories and seeing their stories. I would say that navigating college as a disabled person was challenging. I spent a lot of time and energy trying to hide my disabilities because I had this notion of shame that I inherited from society. I think in retrospect, I see that our systems aren't really designed to help disabled students through the academy. Universities provide accommodations because it's a legal mandate. And of course, this system is far better than having no protections, but it also has a lot of issues. There's a lot of people like myself that didn't really neatly fall into any category to actually receive any type of accommodation that could have helped. I think there's also really a lack of disabled role models or like even just a disability community in math to have that collective and mutual support. Being chronically ill, I think necessarily puts me and others in the same position, almost in opposition to like capitalist productivity, right? We're supposed to work as much as possible, produce as much as possible, get more money, publish or perish. And like broadly speaking, I don't know that our society has a lot of value for folks who could really make a lot of contributions, but might have a different pace, right? Or we might work on a different schedule or a different work-life balance, but it doesn't mean that we still don't have a lot to contribute overall. I would just say raising 2 young children throughout the COVID-19 pandemic is an extraordinary challenge. Any other parent in that situation would tell you the same thing. And I think really colleagues, especially folks who don't have children, or maybe those who aren't that as actively involved in their children's lives, like don't really understand what that's like. Especially systemically, you're right, the vast majority of labor of taking care of children always falls on women. And in the academy, there's like no recognition of that. And there's, I think, very, very little support or appreciation for everything that mother scholars bring to our field. And so I just want to like have a shout out and acknowledge that and recognize that, like, as a father, I have a very different type of privilege when it comes to parenting. And, for me, as an autistic and non-binary person, like, I kind of think gender socialization overall is problematic, and so are the gender roles that we're given by society. And so for me, like little ways that I can push back against that are normalizing having your kids around, or just like trying to be a whole person. I try to do that when I can. And I think it's really important for us to be able to bring our whole lives and our families into the work that we do. So personally, I think having 2 amazing young children in my life and seeing them every day just feels like a huge accomplishment. At a professional level, definitely earning a PhD and later tenure were huge for me. Even though my parents didn't go to college, they've always been a support in seeking higher education, even if they didn't know exactly what that meant. And I really appreciate their support. And it also might seem a little silly, but I feel kind of like humbled or honored every time someone reads one of my papers or cites one of them or says, "Oh, I recognize your work," I think it's just this really nice feeling of community. And, I thought it would kind of wear off, but, I've been publishing things for over a decade now, and it still feels exciting every time it happens. There are so many people that have been integral to my journey, to do it in a way that I think is productive, but also full of humanity. And I wish I could name them all, but you know who you are if you're one of those people. I'll just call out two mentors who have been critical on the math side of things. Coming back to that analysis course I took that made me fall in love with math, Ken Kloppenstein really has just been a wonderful person throughout my career and through my life. Um, Even though I never got to take another course with him after the one that I really fell in love with, he was always there as a mentor and a friend. And even, later in my PhD studies, there were some challenges I was facing, and like he was there for me, and he had my back, and so I'll never forget that. More recently, I have a huge amount of gratitude for Chris Rasmussen, who's been my mentor since I started my first faculty position at SDSU. Chris has just done all the things that you could really hope for in a mentor, helping make connections, opening doors, giving opportunities, sharing wisdom, and just being like a wonderful person and friend. And so I think folks who like that, who like Chris, who sort of pay it forward and just help newer people in the field and kind of carve out space that we can succeed as well, are really a gift to all of us. So I think, folks who are minoritized in mathematics are often pitted against one another and sort of like this competition. I think especially disabled white folks are sometimes like positioned in opposition to racial justice. And so I think all that reflects the way that white supremacy culture and things like that play out in our field, when really we all need to be in this together, in solidarity, supporting one another towards some sort of collective liberation. And so I think to that end, it's really important as you're facing all of the challenges that folks might face, finding those people and finding that community that brings you joy, that makes you feel whole, and that sort of gives that purpose to you. Like, I think especially early in my career, there was this idea that just like you had to work all the time. You always had to work in the evenings. You were not working on the weekend. What are you doing? And I think pushing back against that and stepping back and realizing that it doesn't have to be that way, right? We can actually have all those different pieces of wholeness in life and still be really good mathematicians. And so finding the people that help you do that, finding the people that will support you and not shame you, but kind of love you and take care of you when you're doing that, I think that's the key. It's just about people and building those relationships.